we're going to go ahead and get started. So you guys are looking for the session on getting started with dev containers and VS Code. You're in the right place. We got 25 minutes, so I'm going to go through the slides pretty quick. Sponsors, you guys have seen them, you love them. Make sure to say hi. They make this possible. And if you want everything I'll be showing is either in this repository or it's going to be in this repository. I don't upload the slides until after, and it probably won't be till this weekend potentially. But if you want to take a picture of this QR code, this is the only thing you need to take a picture of. Everything else will be in code in this repository under this session name. Cool. All right. Good. So just briefly, my name's Anthony Howell. I go by the Posh Wolf online, but I got 4 kids, 2 dogs, a wife, full-time job. I don't do a lot of that posting anymore. But I like to joke in this day and age that I'm a natural intelligence hosted on human hardware. We've got all the rage around AI, but natural intelligence has been, working that for a lot longer. So I am employed as Cloud Platform Architect. They're not paying for me to be here, so it's a mystery. Who are they? Well, they haven't paid for that privilege, so. But I focus on containerization, and one of the things that I found is a really cool way to get into containers is dev containers. And so I've done some work with some teams to get them on dev containers, and it's a really good introduction. So that's where the inspiration for today came from. So to follow along, if you want to, either now or in the recording, I'm just on Visual Studio Code. I'm using the latest version. I'm not sure how far back this would work, but it's got that auto updater. And I'm using Docker Desktop 4.40. You can probably use older versions again. I'm not sure how far back that goes. And so today what we are going to be covering is what is a dev container. I got the 1-minute introduction to containers. Getting set up in VS Code for the first time, it's very easy. Creating a dev container from a template, customizing it a couple of different ways, and then how we can integrate multiple dev containers. Okay? It's only 25 minutes, so we're going to be going a little fast. But if you do have questions, please shout them out. Really quick, is anybody here not familiar with what a container is? Well, so this is a quote straight from Docker's, their documentation, their explanation of what a container is. I like to think about it as a self-contained unit that has everything you need to run that application. It'll run on anything that has a container host, right? It'll run on a Windows host, a Linux host, Mac, BSD, whatever you want. And that's everything in it is there to run it. So that's what a container is. Obviously, it's a lot more complicated than that, but for today, that's what you need to know if you weren't familiar already. So a dev container is just a container with some VS Code stuff in it. And so in this diagram, on the left-hand side, that's your host OS, your local OS. On the right-hand side is the dev container itself. So this image is from the Visual Studio Code documentation, not something I put together. And so VS Code installed on your host communicates with the VS Code server in the container, and that is where inside of the container is where the terminals will run, the application, if you're building an application, it's where the debugger runs. But it feels like it's the native VS Code experience. It is quite seamless, which is amazing. And so if you're a Linux guy, your company forces you to use Windows, you can still get the the Linux experience, development experience. Anyway, and that's the last slide. So let's take a look at the demo that we're going to go over. All right. So is this a little bigger? I guess a little bigger here. In the back, is that good? One more. One more. All right. Cool. So what I want to run through first is just, so I'm going to open up, well, actually, I forgot step 1. So the only prerequisite that I mentioned is the dev container extension. And so on the right-hand side, I have that installed. I did not want to take a risk on the Wi-Fi, and where is it at? Where is it at? I promise you it's there. So dev containers extension, it's literally just called dev containers. Make sure that's installed. Make sure you have Docker installed and running. You get some, Docker is not initialized warnings if Docker is not running, the Docker desktop. It is possible to do this in, I think it's a Rancher desktop. There's other alternatives, but easiest way to do it is in Docker desktop. So That's what we're looking at today. That's what I'm familiar with. So let's create a dev container from scratch using the template experience built into VS Code. It's very easy, but I'll explain why it's not that great. All right, so I'm in fresh VS Code session. I'm in a folder. There is no dev container. So I'm just going to open up the command palette, F1, and find the dev containers, add dev container configuration files. Right? I'm going to launch that. It's actually faster now. I did a test earlier on the Wi-Fi and it was a little slow. And we're going to go with the option to add configuration to workspace. And this is where it loads all the templates that have been pre-built for dev containers. All right? So we're at the PowerShell conference. So let's take a look at, there's a PowerShell template. Sweet. Good, you guys can see that. Let's go ahead and open that up. And then we have the option to select features. And we'll look at the JSON configuration this creates. A feature is some sort of script or installation instructions that someone else has put together to install certain packages into a dev container. And we'll take a look at some examples. Right now, we're going to skip this step because the needed features are in this template. And we'll take a look at the file. So a dev container itself is defined in JSON. So on the right-hand side, we have the .dev container folder, and inside of that is the dev container.json. So the configuration is represented in your repository as a file, which means you commit it, you push it, and all the people you're working on this project with now have the same dev container experience, which is great. Okay? So let's look at this config. So this template, you can see there's actually a link to the template if we wanted to look at that. But it's a JSON file, and it has a name at the top, and then the image. So this is the container image that it's built on top of. And if we look at this comes from the Microsoft Container Registry, mcr.microsoft.com, and it is the PowerShell image. So this is literally the image that the PowerShell team builds, and the tag is LTS-Debian11. And tagging is going to vary from different container registries, but what this means, it has the LTS version of PowerShell, and it's based on Debian 11. Can anybody guess what version of PowerShell that might be? I heard 7.5, 7.4. We're going to find out. And so the features here. So like I mentioned, the features are things that you want to install into a dev container. And so the PowerShell container, because that's the base we're building off of, it has all the PowerShell stuff. What are some other tools that you need when you're doing development? Maybe Git, right? That's a big one. Maybe curl or wget or some other utilities on Debian that you need. And so the common utils, and this is one that you always install if you're using an image that wasn't meant for a dev container. And we'll look at dev container specific images. Okay, so this common utils installs all of those necessary packages, and this template has these parameters here. So the lines 9 through 12, and the way that this works is you can actually it's Copilot's on, but VS Code will autocomplete the parameters for these features. And on the next example, we'll have the link to the actual features themselves. And then the post create command. This is what runs after the container is created. For the sake of time, I have pre-created all of the containers, so we're not going to have to sit and wait, and we're unfortunately not going to see the post create command. This one is broken, it doesn't work, so I just wanted to call that out. And then finally, at the bottom, under customizations, we have two ways that we can customize the dev container. Well, specifically, VS Code in the dev container. So we can set all of our settings. So do you guys have like favorite settings in VS Code? One of mine is format on save. I'm the guy that I always write my aliases in PowerShell. I don't write full commands because who's got time for that? So I love format on save. This template sets the default integrated terminal to be PowerShell, my favorite terminal. And then it also adds the PowerShell extension into VS Code. So if we want to build a container using this configuration, I'm going to save this. I'm going to open up the command palette, F1, and the dev containers extension has a reopen in container option. So this is the first time that you are running this. It will download that container image, and then it will go through the process, do a Docker build, and get it all set up. So I have, I'm going to go ahead and launch that. It's going to reload the window. We're going to get a notification in the bottom right-hand corner, connecting to dev container, show log. I clicked on that, and we get the output of the build process. And because I've pre-built this, this is a lot faster. I don't have to worry about, I don't want to have to download a large image over the Wi-Fi here. And so now we're in a container. It's really that simple, and it's faster because I've pre-done this. So what we're going to do is prove this by opening up a new terminal. You can see I'm on Windows, but I get // here. So if I do like hostname, for example, it gives me just a container ID. And if I do PS version table, it looks like the LTS version of PowerShell is 7.2.19. So it's an older version. So what we can do is we can take that template, and I recommend starting with a template if you're not familiar with dev containers. We can take that template, and I'm going to look at an example here, number 2, where we have edited it slightly. And so this is the exact same template. I have fixed 2 things. One, I've updated the image to use the Debian 12 tag. And also what's nice is we get this notification in the bottom right-hand corner. If we want to reopen it in container, it notices the dev container file and says, hey, let's reopen it. So I have updated the PowerShell image to use the Debian 12 tag. So if we go to the Microsoft container registry, this is what we're looking at here. We can see all of the tags. I wasn't sure if this is going to work to do searches, so I preloaded the page. But if we wanted to search for Debian, for example, sweet, it is working. We can see the different versions of Debian that PowerShell's been built on. And so in this case, we can see the Debian 12 image, and it was built on back in February, so it's probably the latest version of PowerShell. We can find out. The other thing I fixed was the post create command. So in this case, the post create command is going to output PS version table. However, I didn't want to recreate the container and then have something else fail because the demo gods are not that kind. And the rest of the settings here are all the same. So let's go ahead and reopen this one in a container. And it's going to go through that same process, reloads the window. We get this notification. We can click on show log. We can see what's happening. And now we're running in a container. Again, a different container this time. So if we look at PS version table, we can see we got PowerShell 7.5. Cool. And what's funny is I haven't updated PowerShell on this laptop in a long time, so you can see I've got PowerShell 7.4.1. So what I wanted to call out there is if you're writing scripts, and this isn't as big of a deal in PowerShell as it is in other languages, but if you're writing a script that is version locked, you can write your dev container to require a specific version of PowerShell. And then everybody that's developing that script has that same exact version, and you don't have to all coordinate and have 5 different versions of PowerShell. Okay. The other thing I wanted to show, if you're not familiar with Docker Desktop, so this screen it shows all the running containers, and so these dev containers are really just containers. Like there's nothing special about them besides the VS Code server and how VS Code interacts with them. And so they're just containers. So if we are in a terminal, we can do Docker BS, and the names are the generated names from VS Code are so long it screws up the output here. But cool. Any questions so far? Yeah. So the question is, how do you manage versions across multiple repositories? Is that a good summary? Yeah. So that's something I haven't touched on here. But if we are using the Debian 12 tag, in this case, when PowerShell 7.5.1 is released and someone builds a new container, the Debian 12 tag is going to have 7.5.1. And so it is important to target. It probably should have done this, but it probably would have been better to use the tag 7.5-Debian-12 because that I'm assuming based on the tag name that has version 7.5 of PowerShell. But across multiple repositories, they all have their different dev container configuration, right? Does that answer the question, or was there something a little more there? Oh, so you're saying if you have a lot, yeah, that's a problem that we haven't solved. So if you have, let's say a dozen, repositories and a dozen dev container configurations, you're like, all right, I want everyone to get version 7.5.1. My first thought would be, if you're in GitHub, is to see if Dependabot does that. I don't know that it does, but that would be the first thing I would check. So great question though, that I was unfortunately unable to answer. Yeah. Ooh, interesting. Does it allow for developer preference? In my opinion, all the developers should be using the same tooling versions, right? And in this case, the customizations in VS Code are still there. Like even though this has required extensions, like they can still use their other extensions. Maybe like the Rainbow Braces extension. I forget what that's called. But for the most part, there's only so much choice your developers should have, right? And so we, in the examples, we've got a team that develops for Backstage, and we moved to using a dev container, and suddenly we had a lot fewer PR problems because everyone was using the exact same versions. So we could talk about developer preference for a long time, but that's a good question. Anything else? Yeah. Yes. So if we wanted to open up a, some folks like ZSH or Bash, like we could open up Bash, right? And what's a good Bash command to test that we're actually in Bash? There we go. Top. Yeah, cool. Thank you. I don't spend a lot of time in Linux. Cool. So what about network access? That's a great question. So I do know the curl command, we can curl google.com from inside of the container itself. We're derailing just a touch here to do this, but if we look at the container, we can actually inspect it and look at the network settings and see that it is connected, it's connected to the bridge network by default. I'm looking at an example where we connect two of them together to the same network and they can talk to each other. Anything else before we move on? Awesome, good questions, guys. So let's look at, because we're at the PowerShell conference, let's look at using a base image and adding PowerShell to it. So in the previous example, we used a PowerShell base image. We added the common utils feature, but what is really convenient is that Microsoft has pre-built, and this is again in their container registry, so mcr.microsoft.com. They have development container images or dev. So if you do a search for dev containers, that's what I searched for here. I know we've got .NET, we got Java, we have a universal one, Node, Python. We have a lot of them, but there's not a PowerShell one. Okay, Microsoft does not offer a PowerShell one, unfortunately. But PowerShell is so easy to add to something; it's not a big deal. Yes, Justin.
I'm going to correct you because this announcement was made just like 2 weeks ago. The .NET one is the PowerShell one.
Oh.
All
right, a note from the peanut gallery. .NET 1 has PowerShell in it. Oh, that's the, okay. There we go. I'm so glad to come to these things. I always learn something. Sweet, cool. And actually, that makes a lot of sense because a lot of .NET people still write PowerShell scripts. Let's say that for some reason you decided that you wanted to learn Go and you spent the last year writing more Go than PowerShell, like I did. And so if you want to do that in a dev container, here's an example of what that looks like. We're going to use the Go dev container from Microsoft. So it has all of the utilities we need to work with VS Code that we would expect for Go. What are all of those? Couldn't tell you. It works. But personally, I still love PowerShell. So I always install PowerShell on these. So I'm using a feature to do that. And I think I have the link opened up here. Yes. So when you use a template, it adds this link, containers.dev/features. And we can go here and we can see all of the features that are available to us. And they'll link to the actual repository they come from. So for example, if we go to common utilities, this is the code for this. So if we wanted to see what is actually running, we can look at main.sh. And we can look at this and say, wow, this would look a lot better if they'd wrote it in PowerShell. But Everyone has their own way of doing things. But this is what runs to install that feature. So in this case, I'm going to install the PowerShell feature. And if we look here in the features, there's a little search. We can actually see that, yes, there is a PowerShell one. So we're going to run out of time here, so I'm going to go ahead and just keep moving. And I'm also going to install the Golang extension, my favorite VS Code setting, format on save. PowerShell is my default terminal. And just open up the command palette, reopen in container. And it's going to go through, it's going to do its thing. And the dev container images are large. I think it's almost 2 gigabytes. So again, I pre-built this so we didn't have to wait for 2 gigs on the Wi-Fi. Cool. And so what I have here is a very simple Go program that is an API. So I'm just going to hit F5 here, run it. And it's running. And it's inside of the dev container. And so, I mean, I can, show you guys, I don't have, if I do Go version, I don't have Go installed on my laptop. But inside of the dev container, we'll open up a terminal, which is conveniently in PowerShell, and Go version, and that's where Go is running, inside of there. And we look at the debug console, we see server launched on port 8080. And if we want to do a port forward, let's see which one's actually working. So 41835, and there is a setting in the dev container, we'll look at it briefly, where you can hard code the forwarded ports. So here, line 29, I didn't do that. So it automatically detects that, VS Code does. And we should be able to copy, or one of these is copy, right? Copy local address, and go back to PowerShell, invoke REST method, / hello world, whoops. And nice, it's not gonna work. So let's do a different example that I know will work. So in the 3 minutes we have left, so we have multiple containers here. We have this container, we're running an API built in Go. We have this container with PowerShell 7.5. We'll go back to the PowerShell console. And let's say that you're developing both a client and a server side, like in this example, very basic example, an API. And so you need to be able to do development and work on both sides of it. And so what we can do is we can put those 2 containers on the same network. Where did my mouse go? So I have just the script here. So using Docker commands, we're going to grab the IDs of the containers. I have them hard-coded, so I didn't have to fumble on this today. I'm going to create a new network called PS Summit. And so if we go, let's see, Docker network ls, you can see that, is that readable for you guys? There's no PS Summit network. Thank you for the confirmation. So I'm going to create the network. I'm going to add both containers to the network, and then we are going to see how that works. So let's copy this. I'm going to run it in this console here. There we go. Do Docker network inspect PS Summit. There we go. If we scroll up here, I know you guys may or may not be familiar with this output, but this container block that tells you all the containers that are connected to it. So we have 2 of them, Admiring Pain and Kind Cartwright. I'm very glad that those weren't more provocative names, because sometimes this gets a little weird. Okay, so what that means is we have, and here let's actually look at the containers here, and you can see these names are also present in the UI. If you need something easy to find, you want to do Docker PS, or just find them here in the UI. So what we should be able to do is we should be able to invoke REST method. Oh, and it's going to autocomplete, and I can use. I'm going to copy this up so there's not a line break. So I can run this command right here. There we go. And I can actually use the name of the container, Kind Cartwright. And I'm saying this like it's going to work. Let's just make sure this is going to work before I get too confident here. And I can do an invoke REST method, and you can see that the response there, because these are just containers. And so last, if you still are want to see how this works development-wise, I can put a line break here, and I can call the API, and it's going to trigger my debugger in the other one. So I couldn't come up with a true PowerShell on both sides, and writing an API in Go is a lot easier than in PowerShell. So and that's it. that's what I got. We're already at 25 minutes. Any questions? Yes.
Go get up code spaces.
I don't have it prepared on code spaces.
Go to a repo and hit comma. Any repo.
I'm not gonna risk that on the Wi-Fi, but the comment is that you can do the same thing in code spaces on GitHub. So they leverage dev containers. It's the same configuration, and it's all in the UI. I do not have something prepared for that, but it's a really good comment. Thank you.
Also free for public repos.
Free for public repos. All right, and it's also a really fun way to interview people. That way, they have a code space all set up, and they can just sit in it and show off their code skills. Or maybe how bad they prompt AI. That's also something I've seen a lot of, unfortunately. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Great. Thank you, guys. Please take a minute to fill out the survey.